In today's video, we are going to cover one of the most common behavioral interview questions that you're going to get asked in a job interview. Tell me about a time you went above and beyond what was required in your role. I'm going to cover why this question is asked, what you need to do to effectively answer this question, things you need to avoid, and ultimately, different examples you can give to answer this question in a compelling way. Now, first, let's talk about the why. Why is this question asked? And it's very simple. Most hiring managers, HR people, and recruiters are trying to identify good team members. People want to find someone who they consider to be a good team member and someone who is willing to go above and beyond outside of the confines of their job description to help their team is someone who is demonstrating characteristics of being a good team member. Now, I want to talk about what you need to do in order to get this interview question right. The first thing that you need to do is actually pick something that's outside of the scope of your job. That's the key. I've asked this question many times as a recruiter, and one of the things people get wrong every single time is they tell me about something they did that's really great. They tell me about something they did that made a big impact, but it fell under the responsibility of their role. So as a recruiter, if someone asked me this question, Ben, can you give me an example of a time you did something outside of the scope of your role where you went above and beyond? And I go, well, this one time I was on a really difficult search. It had been open for 6 months, and they gave it to me to work on it. And I ended up going and calling into a university and talking to a professor and asking if he knew anyone in his network, and then connecting with a couple of candidates, bringing someone in, and ultimately I filled it. That is a great story, but it is not above and beyond. It is not outside the scope of my job. So the first thing you need to make sure you are doing is you need to give them an answer that is absolutely outside the scope of your role. Now, the second thing you need to do is make sure you answer this in a timely way. This is one of those questions where it's really easy to drone on for 4, 5, 6 minutes. And before you know it, you've got this endless stream of consciousness and the recruiter is glazing over at the eyes. When you're answering this question, you want to aim to have it be between, I would say, 1 minute and 2.5 minutes duration. Any shorter than that, you're probably not giving them enough information, enough context, and any longer than that, you're probably starting to drone on. Whenever you're answering an interview question, you want to make sure you're actually answering the question they ask you, and you're doing it in an effective way that is efficient. So make sure you fall between that 1 minute to 2.5 minute mark. Now, the last thing I want you to do is I want you to answer this using the STAR method. Anytime they go, give me an example of a time or tell me about a time when, that's what we consider to be a behavioral interview question. And anytime you get one of those, you want to use the STAR method to answer. That's situation, task, action, result. So what was the situation that you were in? What was the task you needed to complete? What was the specific action you took to resolve the issue? And then ultimately, what was the result? What was the outcome of everything you did? If you do that to answer this question, you're going to provide yourself with a great framework that will allow you to answer it well. Now, lastly, I want to talk about great examples because many of you are probably thinking, yeah, that all made sense to me, Ben, but what should I say? So here's a few examples. So anytime you help a different department, so typically you're going to be working in your own department. So if there is another department that needed help, they had a request out there, and you, outside of the scope of your role, went and helped them perform something, resolve something, fix something, that is a great example. Another great example is staying late to help a teammate. So let's just say you had a teammate who had a project that was going long and you were about ready to leave. Your shift was over, your time was over, your day was over. You saw they needed help. If you can give an example of a time where you stayed later to help them resolve something, perhaps it was something critical and timely that needed to get that done that night, that's another great example because it shows you're willing to go above and beyond, you're willing to stay late when it matters, and you're willing to do what it takes to help a teammate. Another great example is anything you do where you take something off of your boss's plate to help them. So say, for example, you're in a role and you notice your boss is incredibly busy. They have a lot of priorities, and you notice that one of the tasks that you were capable of doing but wouldn't fall under the realm of your responsibility is sitting there, needs to be done, and you can do it. If you have an example of that, that's gonna go great. I mean, think about it. If you're hiring for your team, who wouldn't want someone on their team who, when it makes sense, is willing to take something off of their plate and do it on their behalf? That's a great way to answer this question. The next one is kind of a unique one, but let's just say, for example, you notice that there is a little bit of inefficiency going on in the department, and you're the type of person to look at that and go, I think I can think of a solution. If you notice something like that, and maybe you did a project where outside of working hours, you went through, you looked at some numbers, you looked at some processes, and you figured out there is a more effective way to do this. So you study that, you put a presentation together, and then you brought that to your boss's attention and said, hey, I know this is outside the scope of my role, but I noticed that we're doing this, and I think we could be a more effective version of ourselves if we did this instead. You presented it, they took that information, and they enacted it, and it made your department more efficient. That is another great way to answer this interview question. Now, the last thing that I have here, and this is a pretty easy one, and many of you might be able to share this example, but if you were doing something really well, you have a skill that others don't have. You are more efficient. There's something that you just do exceptionally well. It's your superpower. And you notice that other people in the team or an adjacent team or in a different department, they're doing the same process, but they're doing it ineffectively. Knowledge sharing is another good example. So you can say, I was working with a team. I noticed that they were doing something, a way they had done it for quite some time, but on my own, I had developed a way to be really efficient doing this, and it saved me about 50% of the time to perform this task. What I did is I took it upon myself to go over, set up a meeting with them, communicate the time-saving measures that I've taken, and I helped them improve the efficiency in the process that they were doing. Something along those lines, right? So going above and beyond to share the knowledge you have with other people. It's not part of your role, but you're doing it to help them become more effective. That is another great way to answer this interview question. There you have it. That is everything. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I would be happy to answer them. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit the like button. It tells YouTube I don't suck. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck in your next interview. You got this.